Because, as you know, if you've been watching The Bottom Line on TikTok or on Instagram, or if you've been following international and regional news at all, you would know that Guyana is on track to become one of the largest oil producers in the world. But there is just a tiny problem. Venezuela is now claiming 2/3 of the country as its own, even in and with the oil-rich region of Essequibo being the center of the dispute. So joining us now, we have journalist at the Guyana Times, Jarryl Bryan. Hi, Jarryl.
Hi.
So we have a little echo going on, so just bear with us this evening. I think Jarryl is in a big room and his voice is carrying. But Jarryl, can you just start out by setting the stage with us? Give us a brief history of this dispute.
Okay. First thing to know is that it's not so much a dispute as it's a controversy. The dispute was settled in 1899. There was an arbitration panel that reviewed all of the evidence. Guyana presented its case. Back then it was British Guyana. Venezuela presented its case, and the arbitration panel ruled that Essequibo belongs to Guyana. So the controversy only came about as Guyana was approaching independence. Venezuela suddenly, they had previously accepted the border. And as we were approaching independence in 1966, they suddenly decided that the 1899 arbitral award was null and void. So that's where we are today. But the case is before the ICJ, International Court of Justice. So, yeah.
So you mentioned the 1899 ruling, and there's also something that happened in 1966, an agreement in 1966. Give us some background on what these two things are and why each side is referring to a different thing.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
So there are two pieces of legislation at the center of the ruling. Well, I don't know if it's legislation. One is the ruling from 1899, and then you have an agreement from 1966. So tell us about this and why both sides are using one or the other.
Okay, so the 1899 arbitral award that effectively decided the borders between Guyana and Venezuela, and that Essequibo would belong to Guyana. Now, the 1966 Geneva Agreement came about because of the objections Venezuela raised to the 1899 arbitral award. So the only reason Venezuela stopped accepting the 1899 arbitral award was because of a letter that was written by the last surviving Venezuelan member of that team, that 1899 team. He died in 1949. But before he died, he wrote a letter alleging that there was collusion during the 1899 arbitral award and Venezuela was cheated. He didn't provide any evidence. Venezuela took that letter and ran with it. They never provided any evidence, but because of the confusion that Venezuela was kicking up at the time, British Guyana, everyone decided, okay, fine, we're going to have this Geneva Agreement, this 1966 Geneva Agreement, in the hopes of settling this controversy in a peaceful manner. So that's how the 1966 Geneva Agreement came about. It was a way of settling the controversy. And if the controversy could not be settled, the Geneva Agreement catered for it to be referred to the International Court of Justice, which is what happened in 2018. It was referred. It was referred to the International Court of Justice after failed negotiations. There was a 27 period where both sides were talking. No progress was being made, so the UN decided to refer it to the International Court.
So what happened in 2018? You hearing me? Okay, our guest's internet connection seems to have gone. But yeah, this dispute has been going on for over 100 years, as you can hear, from the background that he was just giving us. So you had the 1966 Geneva Agreement, and that's an active treaty between Venezuela and the United Kingdom. It outlines steps that could be taken to resolve the territorial dispute between Venezuela and the UK over the Essequibo region. And Essequibo is a region that takes up 2/3 of Guyana's entire landmass. I
Hello?
think he's back on with us. Yes, Jarryl, you're
Yes.
having some internet connections there. Glad to have you back. So I was
Yes.
asking what happened in 2018 when it was referred to the ICJ?
Okay, so up until that point, 2018, Guyana had been continuing to have dialogue with Venezuela under the watchful eyes of the UN. And we weren't getting anywhere. And throughout that period, Venezuela has been um, displaying aggression towards Guyana. There was, at one point, Guyana was about to get a major investment, a US $300 million investment, aerospace. And because of Venezuela's threats and so on, Venezuela basically annexed Guyana according to its constitution in 1999. So Venezuela has for a long time been trying to scare away investors. So it's against that backdrop and the negotiations not going anywhere that Guyana decided enough is enough. And we sought the UN to refer the matter to the World Court, and the UN did just that, which is catered for in the 1966 Geneva Agreement.
But I'm asking
Venezuela has been claiming that the
Mhm.
19... Sorry, go ahead.
What was the outcome? It was
Oh,
referred to the I
is still
in
the case is still
2018.
before the ICJ.
Mm.
The case is still before the ICJ. What has been happening is we've been dealing with preliminary matters. Venezuela raised objections to the ICJ um, covering the case. They claimed the ICJ did not have jurisdiction. Twice they raised objections. Both times the ICJ ruled that they do have the jurisdiction to deal with the matter. And then most recently, Guyana had to approach the ICJ to get an order because Venezuela was conducting a referendum, and some of the questions in that referendum infringed on Guyana's sovereignty. So we approached the ICJ for an order against that, and that was granted. So all these things have taken up time that could have been spent towards dealing with the substantive issue before the court. So hence the matter is still being adjudicated.
Mm. So tell us about the Essequibo region. Like how many people live there? We've heard that it's about 2/3 of Guyana's landmass, but is it like a major population or economic center to your country?
I wouldn't say Essequibo is a major population center. Most of our population in Guyana, how Guyana is set up, is focused on Demerara. However, Essequibo is a major resource center for Guyana. All of our natural resources are there: gold, diamond, bauxite, trees, logging, and everything. In addition, our oil resources are offshore. Um, the maritime space is adjacent to Essequibo. So under the international law of the seas, any oil exploration that falls within 200 nautical miles of the coast belongs to that country. So all our oil exploration, starboard block, and everything is within 200 nautical miles of the Essequibo coast. So yeah, Essequibo is very important to us. It's I would say it's the backbone of our economy.
Mm-hmm. Naturally, all the natural resources are there. So what is the mood like in Guyana right now? If you're Guyanese living in Guyana, is it a fearful atmosphere that Venezuela might invade? Are people nonchalant? What is the general sentiment on the ground?
Well, for the most part, commercial businesses, all of these companies operating in Essequibo and so on, it's been business as usual. The government has been on the ground, the president visiting these communities, these border communities, and so on, reassuring them. Um, and businesses have basically been approaching it as business as usual. Exxon released a statement a few days ago in which they basically said they're not going anywhere. um, Similar sentiments have been expressed by other companies and so on, the Canadian companies. We have several Canadian companies operating in the Essequibo. They're either digging for gold or they're exploring for oil. And based on what the Canadian High Commission has said, these companies are treating it as business as usual. However, um, the threat that Venezuela potentially poses to Ghana cannot be underestimated. So the government has been um, basically doing diplomacy and so on in order to get support for Ghana, and the world has generally been supportive of Ghana's cause.
So, but what about the people? You mentioned businesses, but for general people, is there an atmosphere of fear or tension?
Uh, Communities closer to the border town would probably have some tension. A lot of that tension has been assuaged by government officials going on the ground talking to people. People closer to like Georgetown and so on, the major population centers of the country, um, that tension is less pronounced. They're going about their daily lives.
If it was to come to military action, which essentially seems like what Venezuela is threatening, is Guyana prepared to defend itself militarily, as far as you know, as far as what the government officials are saying?
Well, there are several schools of thought that Venezuela is doing this for political purposes, not necessarily to take military action. As you know, Venezuela has an election next year. And as you know, Maduro, he's not looking very good in the polls. So there is a school of thought that this is basically to drum up support for his cause ahead of the elections and so on. The Venezuelan opposition certainly have expressed that view. So, but in case it does come to military action, you know, Guyana has very strong alliances with the U.S. U.S. Southcom is currently collaborating with Guyana, doing training, shared training exercises, and so on. We have close collaboration with Brazil, and we have close collaboration with other countries. So, but Guyana's first line of defense has always been diplomacy, and that is what we're pursuing right now.
Yeah, CARICOM has also extended support to Guyana as well. But listen, I'm not surprised by anything you've just said because I'm from Belize and we have this exact same issue with Guatemala going back centuries. And every election, somebody bring up the claim from Guatemala or Belize and start claiming half the country, the whole country, the keys. Every time, it really is a political issue.
Yep, yep,
Um,
exactly.
and one that the politicians in those countries use to get people on their side, to say, yes, we're going to go after our
Yep,
territorial quote unquote rights in these countries that we were supposed to have decades ago, if not for Spain and Britain and long-standing issues there. But let's look at the overall situation in Guyana now. Venezuela aside, the whole oil situation, country discovered oil, billions of barrels of recoverable oil, and you're now on track to become the fourth largest oil producing country in the world with projected growth of 38% for 2023. But is this something that people are feeling? Like, is it just numbers being reported, or do you actually see progress in Guyana right now?
Well, take for instance this year. This year we had our largest budget in history, in the history of the country. So definitely policies are being rolled out using the resources to benefit the people. Um, Schools, education, healthcare, and so on, which are bread and butter issues, infrastructure, support for agriculture, and so on. Also social services like pensions and so on are being increased and so on. We were supposed to get free university education by 2025. So all of these are policies that would benefit the people.
Nice. I like that free university education within 2 years. Sound like some
Yes.
people need to move to Guyana. You're gonna get some people migrating on the CSME,
We're
Jarryl.
already getting a lot of migration.
All right, let me take some comments from the audience. We have some questions for you. Strong Link says, if Guyana knew that issue was over their head, they should not have gone for independence. Venezuela would not be messing with them. Remember what happened in the Falklands War, Britain would step in. So that 1966 agreement was the year that Guyana gained independence. Did this dispute with Venezuela play a role in Guyana attaining independence?
Guyana had been pushing for independence um, for a while before that. And I think Venezuela saw Guyana pushing for independence and probably decided to take advantage of the issue. Um, but at the same time, around that period, Guyana wasn't operating in isolation. There was a massive move across the Caribbean region, massive move in Africa, and so on to push for independence from Britain. So, they say hindsight is 50-50, but there was a massive move for independence that I don't think could have been delayed.
Right. Well, so in Belize's case, that was the main thing that delayed our independence. Because as you know, most of the Caribbean countries got independence in the 60s, including Jamaica. Belize didn't get independence till 1981 for the very same reason, because Guatemala kept threatening to invade. And small country that we are, needed Britain's help to help defend against that threat from Guatemala. But they still, threaten now and again. Next question comes from, well, it's a comment really, comes from Stronglink, who says, ICJ can't do a thing. Venezuela will just ignore them, sad to say. So if you do get the results that you are expecting from the ICJ, what would that mean on the ground? Does that come with any type of military support, or what, other than words, what is it?
ICJ decisions are actually enforceable by the UN Security Council. And incidentally, Guyana is expected to become, well, Guyana has already been elected to become a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for next year. So that's not necessarily true. ICJ decisions are enforceable by the UNSC. And additionally, Guyana would have much more support with an ICJ decision in its favor from the world than it already has. As it is, Venezuela doesn't have any support for its position that Essequibo is their own. They don't have any support. They have no evidence to substantiate that claim. So I would say an ICJ decision in our favor definitely helps.
Francine says Venezuela is known for doing their thing and they're a bully. And then Chantel says, why do we as third world countries always look towards the USA for help? Because we're small, Chantel.
Yes.
And we're
Yes.
facing a much bigger foe.
Exactly.
Lanesra has a question, re the economy and the oil find. Lanesra says, there's a sense that the foreign companies in Guyana are benefiting more from Guyana resources than the general Guyanese people. What is your take on it?
That's That's certainly a narrative, and it's not just limited to Ghana. In any quote unquote third world country, there is that narrative that foreign companies benefit more than the local people. But if you look at, for instance, our local content laws, we have some of the toughest local content laws of any oil producer in the world. And in fact, when we were implementing our laws, the oil companies weren't too happy about it. But we do have laws that carve out areas that local people can benefit. For instance, international companies, they come together, they have to find local partners, they have to supply their goods from locals, they have to hire locals. We have thousands of Guyanese working in the oil and gas industry. We have thousands of local suppliers who supply Exxon and these other companies and are paid and so on. So we do have legislation to secure benefits for Guyanese.
But hasn't there been controversy about the splits in the revenue with the lion's share going to the oil companies?
Yes, there has. Our our 2016 agreement. A lot of experts are of the view that it wasn't a good agreement, and actually, the local content laws were formed with the intention of undoing some of the damage caused by that agreement. So yeah, I could definitely understand that view.
And on the ground, the sentiment is generally supportive, or most people vex about the agreement?
Uh, Most people in Ghana are definitely upset with that agreement. Definitely. But I don't think anyone who is looking at it from an unbiased perspective can say that efforts are not being made to kick some of the benefits, um, push some of the benefits to Guyanese from the oil and gas industry. Local content, um, um, local business development, and so on, partnerships. A lot of our local companies are actually partnered with Exxon, sub suppliers, and so on, international companies coming to Guyana. So, yeah,
Is there opportunity for that to be renegotiated?
well, the government's policy has been not negotiating the contract. Um, one of the one of the reasons for that is investor confidence. If Ghana is to roll back on a contract, that can affect the momentum of investments. Right now, Ghana is getting a lot of investments, a lot of investors' interest, and so on. And rolling back that contract would negatively affect that. What we have done, there is a new model contract in place that significantly improves any future oil deals that we would sign. And future oil deals will be signed because this year we auctioned some blocks. A bunch of companies came in and they bid for blocks and they were awarded blocks. So any future contracts that they sign with Guyana will be 100 times better.
Okay. Well, we look forward to hearing more about those details. Thank you so much for joining us, Jarryl.